You've just stepped into the dimly lit gallery of the Château de Malmaison, Napoleon's former residence, where portraits line the walls like sentinels of history. Your gaze settles on one painting in particular, the so-called AI portrait. It bears all the hallmarks of a commissioned likeness: Napoleon's hand tucked into his waistcoat, his eyes fixed on some distant victory, but beneath its surface, rumors whisper that this image was more than art. It supposedly foretold the emperor's own demise. Imagine for a moment that in 1814, long before any machine could compute a single brushstroke, someone had harnessed a mystical algorithm, a secret compass pointing toward fate. The story goes that an eccentric engineer, Jean-Baptiste Beauvoir, obsessed with patterns and probabilities, devised a mechanism he called the Mécanisme Prémonitoire. He collected every sketch, droplet of pigment analysis, and eyewitness account of Napoleon's countenance, feeding them into his copper-cased contraption. Hours turned into days as gears clicked and punched cards, yes, punched cards, spat out sequences meant to predict events. Beauvoir then hired a court painter to execute the final portrait under strict instructions, embed within the shadows and highlights a coded message about Napoleon's future. You lean closer. At first, the painting seems ordinary: a carefully modeled cheek, the gleam on the bicorn hat, the crisp silk of the lapel. But then you notice it, the slight downturn at the corner of Napoleon's mouth, the way his right eye reflects an almost imperceptible vertical line, and the faint grouping of 4 dots near his left temple. Beauvoir insisted these weren't flaws but beacons. The 4 dots representing the 4 major battles Napoleon would lose after the masterpiece's unveiling, the downturn of the mouth signaling one final defeat that would bring his empire crashing down. Early in 1814, Beauvoir presented the portrait at a private viewing for Talleyrand's inner circle. The foreign minister, always hungry for leverage, observed the symbols and slipped them to Louis XVIII's emissaries. They saw in the dots a roadmap to rally allies against Napoleon. Within weeks, the coalition forces pressed into France on 4 fronts. Napoleon's fortunes plummeted, and the emperor abdicated. Was it divine calculation, human conspiracy, or mere coincidence? You can decide. But the legend grows even more uncanny. During Napoleon's exile on Elba, Beauvoir traveled to the island, convinced the portrait still held power. Family members recount that the engineer tried to bribe the local artist to paint a companion piece. This one depicting Napoleon safe and triumphant. The artist refused, terrified, and fled in the middle of night. Soon after, Beauvoir vanished from Elba under mysterious circumstances. Some say he was swallowed by the Mediterranean waves, others claim he disguised himself as a common sailor and escaped to America. All that remained was the original painting, quietly transferred to Malmaison after Napoleon's return in 1815. You follow the trail of legends to Paris in March of that year. Napoleon re-enters the Tuileries, greeted by cheers and cannon fire. Yet behind the jubilation, Beauvoir's predictions loom large. Each subsequent battle, Ligny, Quatre Bras, and finally Waterloo, seems to reenact the coded dots. When the Imperial Guard faltered on June 18, 1815, some officers muttered that they'd seen the logic foretold in that strange portrait: 4 defeats, the final crushing blow, and an emperor abandoned by fate itself. Now fast forward to our modern era. You scroll through high-resolution scans of that very painting, now digitized in a French museum database. Artificial intelligence enthusiasts pore over Beauvoir's supposed algorithmic recipe, convinced that if you reverse-engineer the symbols, you could predict contemporary events. A group of data scientists drained the museum's armor-piercing spotlight to image the canvas under multiple spectra: infrared, ultraviolet, X-ray, in search of hidden underdrawings or QR code-like fractals. They even ran those patterns through neural networks, hunting for correlations between the brushstroke geometry and presidential polling data, stock market crashes, or climate anomalies. Their papers, published in obscure journals, argue that Beauvoir's method was the world's first neural network precursor. You pause the video and reflect. Beliefs in mystical algorithms aren't confined to the Napoleonic era. Today, AI casts a similar aura of infallibility. Social media feeds overflow with predictive analytics claiming to forecast customer behavior, electoral outcomes, even personal destinies. Companies sell dashboards that promise to optimize everything from traffic flow to dating prospects, as if human will were a variable to be solved. And yet, as Beauvoir discovered, the line between insightful pattern recognition and self-fulfilling prophecy is perilously thin. Back in Malmaison, some curators insist the AI portrait is nothing more than an artistic experiment in symbolism, a gimmick to attract patronage. The 4 dots? Merely a flourish to create intrigue. The downturned mouth? A stylistic choice, perhaps influenced by Renaissance masters. And the engineer's Mécanisme Prémonitoire? Record-keeping suggests Beauvoir's mechanism may have been as simple as a weighted dice game, where he recorded outcomes selectively to reinforce his own reputation. But that ambiguity is the portrait's greatest magic trick. It lures you into the story, inviting you to project your own hopes and fears onto the canvas. If you believe it predicts destiny, you'll interpret every shadow as portent. If you dismiss it as charlatanry, you can still marvel at how narratives shape our understanding of power. That, after all, was Napoleon's true genius. He mastered spectacle, knowing that conquest isn't just won on battlefields but in the public imagination. As you step back, you notice the plaque beside the painting, Le Tableau Prémonitoire, circa 1814. Courtesy of Musée de l'Histoire Française. Beneath it, a small QR code invites you to view an augmented reality experience. You scan it on your phone and watch as the dots glow, the mouth subtly shifts, and a whispering voice intones, "Fate is coded in every brushstroke." You laugh, slightly unnerved, and close the gallery app. So what's the real takeaway? Is Beauvoir's AI portrait proof that art can foresee history? Or is it a mirror held up to our own desire for certainty in an uncertain world? Whether through punched cards or quantum processors, our yearning to predict the next upheaval drives us to seek patterns where none exist. Napoleon's painted prophecy reminds us that every algorithm, every data set, is a story we choose to tell ourselves. You exit the chateau grounds into the afternoon sun, the portrait's gaze lingering in your mind. You realize that the most powerful predictions are not those that come true, they are those that shape our actions. If you believe a defeat is inevitable, you may unconsciously betray your own cause. If you trust that data can chart your destiny, you might overlook the human element, the courage, the folly, the chance encounter that steers the course of history. And so, as you continue your journey, whether as an analyst, a skeptic, or a dreamer, remember the tale of the AI portrait that knew his death. Let it remind you that foresight is never absolute, that every prophecy demands interpretation, and that the canvas of the future remains, ultimately, unwritten.